Hi, it's Dr. Josh with Alzheimer's Breakthrough. I just finished interviewing Dr. E. What an amazing interview because, like myself, he is in this field reversing and preventing Alzheimer's, and he's been there from almost the beginning, from around 2008 with the Institute of Functional Medicine. So we went deep, we went broad. I learned a lot from this interview, and I think you will too. Don't miss it. Peace and plants. Today's guest is Dr. Yousef Elyaman, a double board-certified physician in internal medicine and integrative medicine. He also has training in pediatrics. He's the founder of Absolute Health in Ocala, Florida, where he takes a root cause systems biology approach to complex chronic disease, including cognitive decline and Alzheimer's. Dr. E is widely known for blending conventional diagnostics with advanced integrative therapies and for guiding patients through personalized protocols that target inflammation, toxins, gut dysfunction, mitochondrial health, and more. He brings clarity to some of the most complex cases, and today he's here to share some of the most underappreciated insights in the fight against Alzheimer's. Hi, everyone. It's Dr. Josh. Alzheimer's is not just a brain disease. It's a total system failure. And my next guest here, Dr. Elyaman, is going to share with us his opinions on this topic. Dr. E, thank you so much for joining us. I heard you as a speaker on the main stage at A4M, the anti-aging conference for physicians. And I was so moved by your presentation. I said, I have to have him on my podcast for the general public to get this word out here. Dr. E, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure, and thank you so much. And I saw you on the stage as well, and you killed it. So you were one of the highlights of the event. So
thank you.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here. So yeah, the whole question of Alzheimer's not just being a disease of the brain, I think that is one of the biggest reasons that we're not finding a cure for Alzheimer's. And I think that the reason is that we are just kind of looking at the body kind of as different silos, as like different organ systems, when the reality is, from an integrative, personalized functional medicine approach, we know that there's only a finite amount of imbalances the body can have. And then based on genetics, some people's brain would be more susceptible to disease. Some people's heart might be more susceptible. Some people's kidney might be more susceptible. So absolutely. And it's not just a disease of the brain. There is a systemic thing that is happening.
Awesome. And and I remember from your presentation, some of your slides were extremely detailed, which I liked because we know that you're dealing with each system. You're dealing with so many different components that are integrating together. And I definitely don't want to overwhelm the audience because guess what? Humans, our brains, are every part of us is complicated.
Yeah.
Let me actually start with something completely out of right field and just ask you, I mean, I love how detailed you are with, and to fix, because you have to fix each system. But what about kind of the whole general part of there are things that are going on that we can't do tests for, that there are, I call it kind of the right brain approach, right? Left brain is all this micro detail. The right brain is the stress and other things like that. What are your thoughts on that approach?
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of, I think that's where we go to personalized care, because I have some people that will present with Alzheimer's or pre-Alzheimer's, and you can tell that stress was a major driver. And the other people, they are calm, they're relaxed, they have good meditation practices, and stress isn't driving it. And I think that kind of narrows it down. So yes, we take that big view and we look at complexity, but one of the problems with complexity is that complexity makes us stuck and it decreases production. It decreases progress if you get too complex. So I like what you're saying. We got to now oversimplify it. But definitely stress and stress management, I think, is going to be a key. I think that we know that when you're under, your body is designed so that when you are stressed, that you can undergo rigorous physical activity. So it kind of sets you up for that. So your cortisol is going to come out. You're going to release cortisol. Cortisol is going to make your blood sugar go up because you need energy. You need sugar to make energy so that you can run away from whatever you have to run away from or you have to fight. Your blood pressure is going to go up because you need to perfuse your organs. So all of these things start happening so that you can undergo rigorous physical activity. But the reality is somebody's just watching the news in their city and nothing's happening around them. And that constantly happening over and over and over really sets people up for disease. And if they have the right genetics and they have the other pieces to the puzzle, then, or the pieces to the equation, then that can affect their brain.
That's awesome. So one of the reasons why I got into this whole field is that to let people know that there's actually hope to prevent Alzheimer's and dementia and hope to reverse them. And,
right.
And I think you're in the same field. Has that been your experience, that these conditions are preventable and reversible?
100%. And see, the problem is that in conventional medicine, they rely on what's called the randomized double-blind placebo-controlled trial, which means you have to take two groups of people, and those two groups of people, they don't know who's getting. You're going to give them either a medicine or you're going to give them a placebo or something that doesn't really have an active ingredient, and you kind of separate them in two groups, and then the ones testing them and the ones that are receiving the test don't know what they're getting, and you're just looking at that one thing, and then you watch and you see who does better. And the problem with just depending on those studies, when it comes to something like Alzheimer's disease that has multiple imbalances that may be causing Alzheimer's, is you're not going to figure that one thing out. So then what happens is that, like, they'll go after amyloid plaque because people with Alzheimer's get these plaques, these amyloid plaques in their brain. So they're like, okay, let's attack these amyloid plaque. But the reality is that it's not the amyloid plaque. It's all the things that are happening that make the plaque show up. But then to kind of answer the question, so then they do these broad studies just looking at one thing, not looking at personalized medicine. And then the conventional docs just start to lose hope. They say, oh, listen, there's nothing you can do for Alzheimer's. In the meantime, I can tell you, and I'm sure you can tell, countless cases that come to us and their brain is not doing well and their memory is not doing well. And we figure out some imbalances and we put them on a plan and we start seeing their memory start getting better. So yes, I think hope is one of the biggest pieces. That's why your podcast is so important. That's why this interview is so important, because there is hope. We face this with inquisitiveness and with the hope and knowing that there is something that is causing it. There is something going on, and let's try to figure it out.
Awesome. So share with the audience how you normally would try to figure it out. So if you've got a new patient who's either has dementia or Alzheimer's or wants to prevent it, what are the steps? And again, I know you could spend hours, but in a brief form, how would you do it?
Yeah, so we would do a test. There's a test called CNS Vitals, which is a computer-based test that's looking at the different areas of thinking or of cognition, and that kind of gives us a starting point. That tells us how well people are doing in their category or in that particular category. Like, let's say it'll look at visual memory. Visual memory is how well they remember shapes and things like that. They do the test. They see how well they're doing according to other individuals of their gender and of their age. And then, so we're kind of analyzing where we're at. And just because the test may say they're doing okay doesn't mean we're not going to keep working on reversing memory, because they're telling us, hey, there's something going on with the memory. Then what we do is after we'll do something. If sometimes we'll do like an imaging study, so we can do. There's something called a MRI with volumetrics. They take an MRI. It's a special type of MRI, and then you can do it in most cities. You can do this type of MRI, but then you have to send it to a company to do the volumetrics to see the different size of the parts of the brain. Which sometimes you don't have to do this, but sometimes it does give us good data. And then blood work. So we check blood pressure, because hypertension or high blood pressure is a major driver of Alzheimer's and of dementia. But then we are going to do blood work, and the blood work in the beginning, we're going to cast more of a wide net and see what's off balance. And then you work on that patient's individual balance.
Awesome. And just along those lines, because this is a shock for a lot of my patients, some of the blood work is not covered by insurance. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, but I'll tell you, most of the blood work that we check is covered by insurance.
That's awesome. Wow. Okay, so then you've done the studies, and then what is the next step? Let's say the volumetric shows that there's some brain problems. The CNS vital signs shows that, maybe the visual memory and some of the other memories or brain processing's not working. Right. What are the next steps?
So you look at those biochemical abnormalities. One of the major drivers that may shock people is and it might not, depending on how much they read it, is this whole concept of Alzheimer's being called diabetes type 3. And one of the big things we look at is insulin resistance. So in order for our cells, or certain cells, some of the brain cells, and like some types of brain cells, but also muscles, also fat, in order for them to get glucose or sugar into the cells, they need a hormone called insulin. And what happens is that insulin binds to what's called an insulin receptor, like a lock and key. And when it does, it opens up these portals so glucose or sugar can go into the cell. And what happens is that you can get insulin resistant, which means that keyhole is not working. And you need more and more insulin in order to do the same thing. And this is way before their blood sugar goes up. What happens is that insulin resistance that happens, it's happening in fat cells, happening in muscle cells, the same thing that causes that can also be happening in different parts of the brain. And then the brain stops getting sugar the way that it should. Certain parts, not the whole brain. But then what happens from there, and that's just one of the reasons that insulin resistance will cause an issue. But then what happens is that when your body is insulin resistant, then insulin levels, the pancreas tries to make up for it. So insulin levels go higher and higher. And then insulin is going to shut off ketones. Now the brain can use these two major sources of fuel. One is glucose, and the other one is going to be ketones, because other fatty acids aren't going to cross into the brain. But if your insulin levels are high, it shuts off ketones. And when it shuts off ketones, now you have sugar not getting into parts of the brain, and then you have these ketones that are not being produced, so they can't go to the brain. So parts of the brain just can't grow, can't progress, can't function properly.
Got it. So when one of your patients has this issue, is the solution changing their diet? Is it a medication or a supplement? Is it all those things? What do you do?
It just depends on what's causing their insulin resistance. So I'll tell you the way to get the way to diagnose insulin resistance. And this is where a lot of times there's kind of misinformation out there. First of all, they don't even look at insulin most of the time. They're just looking at high blood sugar. By the time your sugar's up, you're kind of way along that disease process. They did a study. They looked at young men that were in their 20s, that were not overweight. Their weight was normal. and they checked them for insulin resistance, and over 40% of them had insulin resistance. So it's not just a weight thing, but what you do is the test that you're going to do is you usually will check an insulin and you'll check a glucose. And from that, there's a calculation that you can do, and there's these calculators online. You do what's called a HOMA-IR score. That's one of those clues to insulin resistance. The other thing you do is looking at a regular lipid panel. A lot of people look at that material, they look at a lipid panel and they'll say, you're normal because it's all green according to the lab. No, there's a ratio. You take your triglycerides in the lipid panel over the HDL, what we call good cholesterol. And if that level is higher than 2, that's indicating insulin resistance. And then the third one is that the lab, Quest Diagnostics, has a lab. It's like a patented test. They don't tell us what's in it, but at the end of the day, they give us a score. And that score tells us that they have insulin resistance. So those are the 3 things that you can easily do with regular labs. And you don't even need the Quest one. You could even do the other one, but I feel like the Quest one might be accurate. So now you see, and you have insulin resistance. You have a number, and then you start trying to figure out why that patient has insulin resistance. And I think that's why, and we'll make it as simple as possible, but I think that's the challenge. People just think that everybody that has insulin resistance has it for the same reason. So one reason for insulin resistance is that somebody is just eating too much. They're eating too many carbohydrates. Those carbohydrates are telling the pancreas make more insulin. You're making too much insulin, and the body is afraid that your sugar levels are gonna go too low. So then that receptor, that little keyhole, starts to get resistant because it doesn't want to drop sugar levels too fast. So that's one thing. So looking at what they're eating, consuming more fiber, consuming more phytonutrients. If you look at the different colors of vegetables and fruits, they all have the reason they have different colors is that they're these phytonutrients. They actually have healing properties. They help different systems. So we shoot for 6 servings of vegetables. Depending on where they're at in the road, sometimes we'll have them do 2 fruits a day. Sometimes we'll hold off on fruit until we can reverse it. But nutrition is a big piece. Inflammation causes insulin resistance, and there's a test called high sensitivity CRP that we can look at. And if we see that inflammation is high, we look at the things that can cause inflammation. One of the things that can cause inflammation is not getting enough sleep. So you have sleep apnea, or are you staying up all night watching Star Trek, which I might actually know something about from experience. I am a Star Trek fan.
All right.
But if you're not getting a good night's sleep, then what can happen is that can cause inflammation to go up. So then you also look at, are you eating a lot of processed foods? And the processed foods can have different chemicals in them, unfortunately. And those chemicals can also cause those insulin receptors to not work. So that can cause insulin resistance. And are we sitting all day? Are we getting up and moving? So getting some walking, get those steps up to 10,000. And I don't want to keep going on and on, but I'll tell you, one of the things we did, early on, I learned about the work of Dr. Dale Bredesen. I went and learned from Dr. Dale Bredesen. I love his book. I love the work he's doing. I think he's making a huge difference in the world. So what happened is that I got excited and I did a group visit where people would come to the office. Had a group of about 30 people. We would do CNS vitals, and every month we would meet together, and we talk about one principle of helping memory. Beautiful thing is, at the end of the study, we looked at everybody's results, and we were able to see a significant improvement in their cognition, their areas of cognition. But there was one patient I remember who he wouldn't do anything we told him except for one thing. My health educator, like all the nutrition, all this stuff, my health educator called him and kept reminding him to walk. The health coach kept reminding him. He went for his walks. He didn't want to take his supplements, didn't want to do anything. And just walking, just making sure that he went on a walk every day, he had a significant improvement in his memory. So don't underestimate walking.
Yeah, exercise is key. And I'm just curious, talking about insulin resistance, how often do you see fatty toxins like PCBs, industrial toxins, forever chemicals contributing to that too?
So it's a huge piece. And the problem with, and that kind of goes to another thing that's causing the insulin resistance. And I'm glad you mentioned that. So we have toxins that are coming from like you kind of mentioned, from utensils and from just kind of from the things that are around us. Somehow they get from packagings, but then also when they genetically modify food, they genetically modify it so that Roundup doesn't kill the plant, right? So that they could put a weed killer kills the weeds and doesn't kill the plant. But what does that mean? That means that there's weed killer, that there's chemicals that is found in the food that's supposed to be really good for us, and then you get a little bit of chemical with it. So I like looking at the environmental work group. There's a list called the Dirty Dozen and Clean 15. The Dirty Dozen is the 12 fruits and vegetables that have the most amount of toxins. The Clean 15 are the 15 that have the least amount of toxins, so you don't have to go as organic with those, because it gets a little bit overwhelming. But back to that, one of the big things about a lot of these toxins is these toxins are fat soluble, which means they don't float well in your blood, which means they stick to fat. And a lot of times the body will make more fat so that it can hold on to them. And for that, we do, in our office, we call it a 28-day cleanse. But what we do is we can take a period of time where we're having patients decrease the toxins that they're putting in their system. And then we give them certain supplements that help the liver change that fat soluble toxin to water soluble, so that you can then pee it out and poop it out. And that is a big piece of insulin resistance. And I'm so glad you mentioned that.
That's awesome. And then you mentioned, at least after you read Dale Bredesen's book, doing a group session, and that one patient who, would only exercise if he or she got a phone call. So my next question to you is, how often are you normally checking CNS vital signs or doing a cognitive test to track your patients?
Let me clarify. So I started seeing about Dale Bredesen's work, and then I teach for the Institute for Functional Medicine. I belong to the first graduating class of the Institute for Functional Medicine. So fortunate, like this, just sometimes, man, you plan one thing. I was very anti-natural. I was very sarcastic. I have a lot of amends to make up for if they remember the things that I said, until I kind of saw the light. And I saw the light first with the Institute for Functional Medicine. But that being said, as a teacher for the Institute for Functional Medicine, they partnered up one year with Dale Bredesen, and they said, as a faculty, you can come and you can train with Dr. Dale Bredesen. So I'm like, yes, I will take a look at my schedule. But what I was really saying is, oh my God, yes, I can cancel my appointments. I'm going. So I went and I trained, and then I come back, and then I have his book on tape, of course, because of my ADHD. And then I'll read a couple chapters, a little bit here. But that being said, that was not the question. The question was about the CNS vitals. So we first check them, and we get a baseline of where it's at. And like I said, even if you may be in the 60th percentile, which means better than 60% of people, your gender, your age, in certain areas, that is not, if you're telling me that you're feeling your memory is off, what if you were a genius reading people's brains, and now all of this time, now you're just at the 60th percentile, and you're going down, right? So I'm going to usually put them on some sort of a plan, and I'm going to want to check them. Eventually, our walking dude, he ended up walking on his own. It took some time of her encouraging him, calling him. She called him maybe once a week. And after a while, it was just part of his process, because he saw how good he felt on it. And he kept that up. And then he started taking his supplements kind of here and there, not perfectly, but a little bit better. But you check it first. Then we'll check in about 3 months to 6 months, depending on how worried we are about them. And then we get to a point, I want to see those numbers getting better. I want to see memory getting better. And when we're there, I will have on the appointment, on the schedule, we will have them coming in once a year. And we will be just analyzing and seeing what their memory is doing once a year. And if they start having issue, we're going to recheck that again.
That makes perfect sense. So Dr. E, so first of all, it's exciting that you're seeing improvement. How long, and I know every case is different, but how long does it normally take to see improvement for people whose brains are not working right?
So it depends on the person. So if the person if it's really bad insulin resistance, and it depends on the plan. So I really don't want people to think that there's one diet for everything. So like one of the nice things about the keto food plan, or like a low carb, higher fat, I don't go as high in fat with keto. The Institute for Functional Medicine has something called the mito food plan, for mitochondria. So a lot of times we'll give patients that. But what happens is that takes when you're switching from having sugar as a fuel to fat being your fuel, you can have a couple of days where you're not feeling so well. It takes about 3 days till you start getting into it. Usually within a week, man, they're feeling so amazing, especially if insulin resistance is the issue, because now all of a sudden the brain starts getting nutrition that it didn't have, and it just kind of wakes up. But I usually, I say give it at least a month. And that's part of the reason we test, because when you live with yourself day to day, you can't always pick that up. I mentioned sleep, and just so we don't forget it, I do want to reiterate, or I do want to mention another piece that may be part of Alzheimer's, and that is our brain. You need blood flowing into the brain, right? And then you need to be able to get rid of the toxins. And getting rid of the toxins, there's a system, it's called the glymphatic system. Like the lymphatic, but with a GL, glymphatic system. And the glymphatic system, actually, Chinese researchers are studying now. They actually are doing a surgery that helps get rid of that shunt, the stuff, the toxins in the brain, helps bring it back to the bloodstream, and they're seeing Alzheimer's start to reverse. So it's kind of exciting, right? But we don't have to, before you go to China and get a brain surgery, the one of the biggest things that helps that glymphatic system and helps get rid of those toxins is going to be sleeping on your side, and another one is going to be boosting nitric oxide. From what I've seen, what I'm looking at. So those are two things that will kind of work. But but sleeping on your side, it seems to be that sleeping on the right side is better than the left. But for people that might just be sleeping on their back and they don't have sleep apnea, trying to sleep on their side if they can, I do think would be helpful. But yeah, back to insulin resistance.
No, those are great tips. And I just want to take another diversion just to let the audience know how new some of this is. You are literally in the first training class with Institute of Functional Medicine. What year was that?
That was 2000. When we first started like doing the modules and stuff, it was 2000. It was around 2008 or 9, I think, when I started working with them. When we finally graduated, I'm trying to remember, I think it was 2009 or 10. I have to double check.
Right.
It was a while. I'm ancient. It was a while ago, but it's new. Well, it's very new.
Well, yeah. It's relatively new, which is why most physicians aren't. This is not something that they're typically teaching in medical school, for example. Right.
Right.
Although
I had an attending. So I did internal medicine and peds. So I'm an adult doctor and a pediatrician as well. And I remember what was drilled into our heads is there's nothing to natural medicine. There's nothing to herbs. There's nothing to that stuff. And I had a doctor who told us how to deal with anybody asking about things like garlic for cholesterol. He said, this is what you do. Show them, point to the door and say, get out. We're not natural doctors. And it was so internal medicine, what did you do? What was your residency?
Mine was emergency medicine surgery first. I switched from surgery to emergency medicine, but I would say
You were traumatized more than us.
True, true,
Yeah.
I remember that conversation in medical school at Harvard.
Yeah.
That it's like, sure, there might be something to this, but just focus on the there are enough medications to fix everything.
Well, yeah, and it was an environment. There's an environment of you don't argue with the attendings. What they say goes. Everybody's so afraid they're going to get kicked out, and that they're going to be. And there was a lot of. I don't know if it's getting better now. You watch the family practice medicine residents; they're all doing woo-saw and like they're doing yoga and whatever on the side, and we're like, what the heck's happening there? And on our side, they're like, are you going to kill your patient? How many? Like very, very intense, very, very like, what the heck's wrong with you, buddy? They're trying to shape us, but they kind of shaped us into, there's nothing to anything natural. It's all bogus. It's all woo-woo.
Right. And my point now is that you don't want to take anything off the table when you're dealing with a chronic condition like Alzheimer's or dementia, where because there's so many different moving parts, if you just say, hey, I'm going to ignore this whole area, you're not necessarily going to get the best results for your patients.
Correct. So to say, hey, the key to Alzheimer's is this one thing is great to like sell a book, but it's not in reality in life. There are many parts. The beautiful thing though is that yes, there are many things that can go off, and there's different ways. That's why you got to get with somebody that knows how to analyze this data, right? And now we have AI that can help us even more analyze the data. But AI will tell you what you got to be careful with AI. It'll tell you what you want to hear. It'll start listening to you, hearing that you're wanting to hear something. So soon it'll say, yes, you're absolutely right. All you have to do is eat dark chocolate towards the end, right? And your Alzheimer's will go away. But the beautiful thing is that you can narrow it down to a few categories of imbalance. And then once you've narrowed it down to that category, then you kind of go into breaking down that category and how do you analyze it and what can you do about it. So
awesome. Is it okay if I ask you some quick fire questions?
Rapid fire.
Yeah. So what's the most overused prescription in neurology that you see for brain science?
For brain science, well, I wouldn't say overused, but I'd say ununderstood. I say they give people statins and because they have maybe high cholesterol. And the problem is, and what they're not considering, so I think doctors just get stuck into one type of prescription. And as the statin science really evolved, first of all, many people are out there on statins and they don't even meet current guidelines for statin therapy. The second thing is that the statin cholesterol medicines, yes, the data shows they're good for secondary prevention. Secondary means you've had a stroke or heart attack, but if you haven't, the data is not really that great on them. And that's why we look at the risk of individuals, but it's so much easier to throw them on a statin. But here's the piece that I think that is overdone and maybe hurting the patients too. The first thing is that they don't look at how the statin works in the body. So they just think, get them on a statin. The reality is that there's a list of statin drugs, but two of them don't cross the blood-brain barrier as much. They may cross them, but not as much. Now, what is the blood-brain barrier? Well, the blood-brain barrier is kind of like that the interface between what's in the blood and then the cerebrospinal fluid and whatnot. So what happens is that if they are giving the type of statins that are fat soluble that are crossing into the blood-brain barrier, it could actually be toxic to the brain. So there's two of them. One is going to be rosuvastatin. Rosuvastatin has, if they have had a stroke or heart attack or they're really high risk, they're smoking or whatever, rosuvastatin can be given twice a week actually initially because it has a long half-life. And then the other one is going to be pravastatin. Most of the other ones cross into the brain and could be causing more damage than good. The second thing is they just give the drug and they forget about it. But those drugs can deplete vitamins and minerals and things that the brain needs. And one of the things that they do is they can stop your body. They'll stop you from making this a precursor to called GG, taken from that becomes CoQ10. So now they get lower CoQ10, which your brain needs. But also what it does is you need it to convert vitamin K, the raw vitamin K, to the active form of vitamin K, and then they can start getting calcifications in the brain as well. And then the other thing is well, let's go back to the CoQ10 piece. So we'll check. Well, yes, if they have to be on a statin, great. A lot of them don't have to be on one. But if they are on one, then we're going to be mindful of which statin. Everybody's different, so pick the right dose. Work on all the other things. I think that's one of the big overrated things. And this is a horrible rapid fire. I'll do better with the next question. But the last piece is I'll check. You can, in regular blood, you can check CoQ10 levels. Check the level. See what the level's doing. Get the level to 3 or greater. And that's the things we do. And this is for, of course, entertainment purposes only. Please don't do anything that I say on the show. Just take my jokes. This is for the jokes.
Okay. Awesome. So next question is, what is the first test you would do for someone with brain fog? First lab test.
That's a hard one. So just like category or
Sure.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So insulin resistance panel, I'm going to want to look at, right?
Okay.
I'm going to also, blood pressure is big too. And I try to find out, is their blood pressure going high in the morning and at night? Lab test, I'd like to do a sleep study, but that's not a lab test. I do a full thyroid. Brain fog a lot of times is thyroid. And one of the problems is that they don't check, conventional medicine doesn't teach us how to check the full panel and analyze it. They're just worried about who do we give the prescription to. So they just check what's called a TSH. If you're really smart and a little bit kind of on the cusp of like science, you do something called a T4, a free T4. If you're even smarter, what we do is TSH, a total T4, a free T4, a total T3 or a free T3, a reverse T3, anti-thyroid, anti-TPO, and anti-thyroid globulin antibodies. And we take a look, and we're looking at if they have a really high amount of reverse T3 or there's ratios with the reverse T3. If that's off, then that may be the big thing causing their brain fog. And then we can give them things like ashwagandha and stress management and things like that. And then we check insulin. We check a homocysteine level, because homocysteine can be toxic to the brain, and that can mean that they need B vitamins. And then we are gonna check some vitamins, vitamin D. We're gonna check a folic acid or RBC folate. We're gonna also check a zinc and copper, because if your copper's high and your zinc is low, that can be an issue. And of course we will check advanced lipid panels. We don't want to just look at the regular lipid panel. I want to know, so cholesterol you can have for what they call bad cholesterol, but it's not really bad. That it's needed, but too much of it can be an issue, and the wrong kind can be an issue. So looking at that, your LDL cholesterol that takes cholesterol from the liver to the other tissues can be the big fluffy ones, the intermediate, or the tiny ones. And the tiny ones seem to be the biggest problem. And then we check for markers of oxidative stress to see if your body's rusting. And we check an A1C to see if your body is caramelizing.
Excellent. So next question is, we've talked about a lot of different causes for Alzheimer's and dementia. What would you say is the most underrated? What's the one most underrated cause of dementia?
Sleep.
Okay. I love it. And then what's one brain supplement you actually take yourself?
Oh, so and it's full body supplement. So I'm one of my gigs, because I can't get enough of doing all kinds of stuff. One of my gigs is I am the medical director of the company called Helman, with 2 N's, which they make what I think is a phenomenal supplement. And this is a reason I actually started working with them, called Neo 40 Professional, which actually helps with the methylation with the homocysteine thing. And I have that MTHFR gene mutation, but it also gives the body what it needs to boost nitric oxide. And nitric oxide helps with blood flow and helps with energy and so that's one supplement that I take. I also think it's brain too, but I like magnesium malate. Magnesium is so underrated. It's one of the best things out there. Twice a day. I don't go home without it. I actually did the other day, and I kind of paid for it, but magnesium kind of bound to malic acid, and malic acid is needed in the Krebs cycle, which are in your mitochondria, and the brain has a lot of mitochondria.
Very cool. And what's one food you avoid due to brain health? You want to protect your brain. What's one food you don't eat because of that?
All right, so there's theoretical and there's like real life. So in real life, sometimes I do things that aren't the greatest for me, but I think one food that may be causing definitely it's the processed food category. I think the high carbohydrate foods. Now, if you had a high carbohydrate food and you went for a run, that's great, but those are I think the high carbohydrate foods are a big issue. Oh, the other thing too is everybody's drinking the diet sodas and diet, and it's kind of what we don't know what those toxins are going to be doing to our brain. And I've seen people just feel so much better just by stopping the non-nutritive sweeteners. Now, if I'm out and I'm having a moment of weakness and I'm like, I don't want my sugar levels to go up, I'm not going to say I have or I will, but I'm not going to say I won't.
Okay. Fair enough. What would you say is the best detoxification agent for brain fog?
I really like sulforaphane. Sulforaphane is found in like cruciferous vegetables. And that's hard, man. I like NAC as well.
Awesome. Next quick question. What's your favorite genetic test for Alzheimer's? Is it just ApoE looking for E4, or do you do other types of testing?
I like MTHFR as well.
Okay. Awesome. And what's
I like COMT as well, because so the COMT I think is I think it's one that they people miss, because when COMT is needed to break down estrogen, but it's also needed to break down your adrenaline and your noradrenaline, and you need noradrenaline to focus, but too much of it you get anxious. And what the problem is that if you see COMT abnormal, then you got to work on that enzyme and decreasing stress and that kind of thing. But if it's absolutely normal, if it looks green on the tests, then your body is breaking down the norepinephrine too fast, and it messes with people's focus. So
that's important. I'm just nosy. Do you ever check neurotransmitter levels?
I can't find good data that shows that if I did split samples, they're accurate. I don't know if I'm looking at what's happening in the kidney, the gut, or the brain. Right. So I want somebody to convince me to check them, but I don't. But I'm not checking them now because I just can't find good research showing it's reproducible. But not knocking people that are doing it. If it's working for you,
awesome. So, what's one belief about treating brain fog, Alzheimer's, dementia that you've changed your mind about recently?
Oh, recently.
In the last few years.
Yeah. I think more and more the power of walking is just telling people, go walk 15 minutes in one direction, turn around and walk back. I've personally seen a difference. I think my patients, I notice a big difference. It's one of those things that's kind of hanging there, but it's not until you try it. I take people off antidepressants. I take people off cholesterol medicine. I take people off diabetes medicines when they do that.
Cool. And what are 3 tools that you use for mitochondrial repair?
Okay. So we already mentioned magmalate. So I'll call that one, magnesium and malic acid. Ubiquinol, and I use ubiquinol with GG because GG helps make it, right? Sometimes we'll use PQQ. So PQQ may help as well. And I think that's 3.
Awesome. And then what's your favorite protocol for fasting? Do you ever recommend fasting of any type to your patients, and what type of protocol do you use?
All the time. And I think it depends on, I think that's back to, it depends on the patient. You have some people that have a lot of trouble with fasting. They get hypoglycemic, and those people, we work on tolerance. We work on spreading the time more. We have them get glucose monitors and check and see if their sugar's actually off, or is their body having a temper tantrum, because you never know. Sometimes their sugar isn't off. But if I had to say kind of the best, just for the general, I think every day doing a 12-hour fast, meaning no calorie. If you start eating or taking calories in at 7 a.m., after 7 p.m., you have nothing. And then twice a week doing a 15-hour fast, or whatever the calculation is, where you stop eating at 7, the next you go to bed, you wake up in the morning, you have maybe coffee, maybe, without the sweetener and stuff. Maybe you can have tea, maybe you can have water, but you hydrate and you wait all the way till 12 o'clock, and then you eat healthy at 12 o'clock, because a lot of people want to eat healthy. They just eat whatever that they feel like, I fasted, I deserve it, and then they kind of mess up what they did. So I like those. 24-hour fasts are great once in a while. A dry fast, if people are really stuck in weight loss or then sometimes we'll do dry fasting, but we got to be really where they're not having food or water for 15 hours. But the issue that we got to be mindful of is eating disorders are so prevalent, and we don't want to make it, we want to do it gently, and we want to be looking out for, we don't want to trigger eating disorders.
I agree with you 100%. And we both go to lots of conferences. What is one technology that you've recently seen that, or two or three, that really excite you for the future?
This is not recent. I just continue to be excited about hyperbaric oxygen, which we do in our office. Neurofeedback we were doing, but I really think we're missing something with neurofeedback. The transcranial magnetic therapy may have something to it. What about you? What are you seeing that you're excited about?
So I'm excited by total plasma exchange.
Yeah.
Just
I'm glad you mentioned that. Okay, so
to remove toxins from people's body, because toxins are one of the causes of Alzheimer's and dementia.
Are you doing it in your office?
I am, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like the poor man's plasma exchange, I've been looking into, which is, even if you can't afford to do the full one, at least go donate plasma a couple times a week and at least give blood, actually going and giving blood to get rid of some of those senescent cells. But so you're doing the plasma, and are you what's your protocol looking like?
Yeah, we're doing once a week for 6 weeks.
Okay.
Trying to mirror the AMBAR studies, but we're flexible. If someone says only want to do it once a month, we'll do it that way too.
Do that.
And then question about, I've asked a lot of different questions. Are there any questions I forgot to ask you?
No, I think we can keep talking. So ApoE, I think ApoE, as we know, you get one from mom, one from dad, and you can have a 2, a 3, or a 4. So you end up with a combination 2, 3, 3, 3, 4, 4, 4, 3. And if you have one of the 4s, it does increase your risk of Alzheimer's. And I want people to know that people have 4 and they never get Alzheimer's. And actually, there was a study that showed in Nigeria, they have ApoE4 doesn't increase the risk of Alzheimer's at all.
Right, because of their lifestyle. Again, That's what I tell people. Even if you're a 4-4, if you do the right choices from a lifestyle perspective, you're not at increased risk. So that's why you actually want to know that this is an issue for you genetically, so you can actually take action, quickly.
So the ApoE4, the one, if they do have it, there's an issue with the way that the body processes cholesterol. So those patients kind of have to, and they're very susceptible to carbs. So lower carb, higher fiber. Not doing, I don't have them do the extreme ketos. I have them do higher protein, but kind of more of a leaner, more vegetables and whatnot. They really got to stay away from alcohol. That's a big one. Yeah, I'm going to be a little bit more kind of, you got to take care of their blood pressure as well. But those are, but I think knowing your ApoE4 and then it is important, but I also think, and then know that you might have to adjust your food plan. The other thing that we didn't mention is that if you do, a lot of times people will have to have a blood pressure medicine. And if they're at the point where they need a blood pressure medicine, there's data that shows that the blood pressure medicine called telmisartan actually crosses the blood-brain barrier. It may help prevent the progression of dementia, but it actually has another activity called PPAR gamma activity, which helps with insulin resistance. So a lot of people will see their doctor and they'll work on their blood pressure and they'll work on their cholesterol, but they'll give them the wrong prescription because they're just not aware of the difference between the same the same class of drug, but some will have positive and some will have negative. Like you could give somebody candesartan, which could increase uric acid. And I think that's something we forgot to mention too, uric acid. Uric acid depletes nitric oxide, and we want to get that uric acid level to less than 5.5 in a postmenopausal female and in a man. And then if the person is having periods, less than 4.5.
Awesome. So where can people find you, Dr. E?
Yeah, so online, I've done a challenge. So the last 8 months, I've made myself do a social media post every day. So take a look at Dr. Elyaman on Instagram and across the platforms. I know there's a lot of practitioners that listen. So at FMP Essentials HQ. And then everybody check out the podcast. Actually, Dr. Josh, you're going to be one of my famous guests. I know we're filming next week, but the FMP Essentials show, check it out on YouTube or across the platforms. I like YouTube because you can see the videos. I hope to see everybody online, and I really hope this was beneficial. Thank you for having me on the show.
Dr. E, thank you so much for joining us, and peace and plants.